Many thanks, and it's a huge pleasure to be part of the 10th anniversary celebrations of GALF. Thanks to Mr. Mauzo and Vivek for having us over. With that, I think we begin our session today. I have had interactions over the past few days. I've been reading all about the extraordinary life and death of Sunanda Pushkar. This is how the book looks. And I've come face to face with a lady I did not know too much about, which is Sunanda Pushkar. And I haven't read about any of these aspects of her personality, even during the years when she was married to Mr. Tharoor, which is when she was more in the limelight. And I would like today to begin, and of course Sunanda Mehta has written this book from a very personal connect because she has known Sunanda Pushkar as a youngster. And today I'd like to ask you what kind of prompted you to write this book and your own connection with Sunanda Pushkar.
Thank you, Nirmala, and thank you everyone for being here. The starting point was that I was her friend, which is why I wrote a piece on her after she died for the Indian Express, from where finally the germ of this book really traveled. But I have to say that the reason for the book was less of my being a friend and more about the intriguing and phenomenal life that she led. I often say she was a woman, whose life was defined by her death. It's because the way she died in the mysterious circumstances. I thought it's important to tell the story of her life. I thought it's important to give a context to the woman who, like you said, was known only as the wife of India's most enigmatic politician, as Mrs. Tharoor. But when she married him, she was about 45. So there were about 45 years of her life before that, which were largely unknown. And I thought it's very important to put a context to her life before people start in a way judging her or her death. I wanted not just the wife, but Sunanda, the daughter, Sunanda, the sister, Sunanda, the friend, and perhaps most importantly, Sunanda, the mother, to also be known to the world, which is why I took up this assignment.
No, but Sunanda, could you take us back to your childhood when you actually met? How did you meet Sunanda first, Pushkar first? Yeah.
So she and I were in the same school. We were schoolmates. She was a year senior to me. And that time, I did not know her very well. I didn't interact too much with her. Because she was older, she was in a different class, and she was the Red House captain, I believe, and I was in the Red House, so I was a little bit in awe of her. But later, in Jhansi, because her father was in the army and so was mine, they were posted together. She was studying at the time in a government college for women in Srinagar, but she would come down for holidays, and that's when we really bonded. So the Sunanda I knew in Ambala was a very different Sunanda. She was very shy, unassuming, quiet, reserved, would remain in the shadows. But when I met her again in Jhansi, she probably showed the first signs of the kind of Sunanda she would become. She had become more outgoing. She had started, looking beautiful. She had changed. So, it was like this gawky Sunanda in Ambala, but the gorgeous Sunanda in Jhansi, whom I knew. And then we kind of lost touch. I met her again a couple of times, once after her first marriage had ended. It was a very sober Sunanda I met. And then again, after some time, I met her, in Pune. And she was back to her gregarious self. But that was in '89. That's the last time I really saw her. I thought I'll reconnect after she exploded on the scene as Mrs. Tharoor. But sadly, I kept putting it off, and then it never happened.
Yeah. And so since this book, has initially arisen out of a personal connect with Sunanda, because let's call her Pushkar because I'm going to call Sunanda Pushkar, and I'm going to call Sunanda Mehta Sunanda.
Okay, that's an innovative way of lessening the confusion.
Yeah. So, at what point does the personal connect, like in your own writing, where does the personal connect with Pushkar end and where does the writer in you begin?
Actually, right from the beginning. When I started the book, I decided that it will have to be done as a writer. It should not be a book I'm writing of a schoolmate. It should be, and it was, a book about an extraordinary woman who happened to be my schoolmate. And there was no other way of writing because I wanted the book to be free of any kind of bias, subjectiveness, or prejudice, and more like a journalistic attempt to talk about her life and, of course, her death, which is also 1/3 of the book, with all the investigations, everything. So right from the beginning, I was able to keep that distance and the disconnect and, treat her as a subject, because that was the only way to be fair and to be honest with the book. There were a couple of times, of course, during the course of my research, when the author in me took a backseat and the friend took over, one being when I met her son. And well, that's when, your heart goes out to the boy. And I remember that time it was more of an emotional talk I had with him than a purely professional one. And another time was when, during the research, I came across some photographs of her death, when her body was found. So they were deeply disturbing. It took me about 2 weeks to get back to writing after that. So I think these were two occasions when the author took a backseat and the friend came into the fore. But by and large, it's remained an objective work.
Would you like to read a small passage from your book which kind of draws out this contrast?
So actually, I'll read out a passage about her son. Like I said, that was the time when, the author had to take a back seat. So this is something the son only wrote in the book. I'd like to read that out for everyone. This was, I told him to write just about his mother, and he is a very good writer himself, and what he felt when she passed away. My first reaction, this is all a dream. It's not real, I will wake up. My second reaction, live 2014, that's the year Sunanda died. Live 2014 to the fullest and then die on 17 Jan 2015. She died on 17 Jan 2014. My third reaction, my taste buds for life have turned to ash. My fourth reaction, survive, the rest will figure itself out. What did I go through that day? I lived with the thought that I could not protect my own mother. As a single son to a single mother, there's not a big checklist. But the one thing, the main thing, is to keep your mother alive. To stand up for her and make sure she is happy. But when it came to my most important mission in life, I failed. There is nothing I will ever want as much as I had wanted to succeed on that front, to make her proud of me, to defend her against death itself. Friends, associates, therapists, all keep telling me this one thing. Hell, even a part of me tells me the same thing. Don't blame yourself for her death. I'm aware that I'm not directly responsible, but I know if I had been there for her, things might have been different. I will forever live with the burden that I could not save my mother when it was within my ability to do so. Maybe a part of me wants to go easy on myself, but I don't think I will ever stop blaming myself for her death. Performing last rites, how surreal it feels. 1 minute, here's your living, breathing mother, flesh and blood, and the next thing you know, you're cracking her skull with a rod so her brains don't cook during cremation. Who says you can't learn something new every day? Losing the person who was my best friend, sister, mother, father, daughter, all at once, almost drove me insane. If it weren't for the thought of my mother being deep inside me, inside my heart and soul, I don't know how I would navigate my life. Her passion and energy live within me, and it's something I'm grateful for every day. Is it strange that I feel like Icarus, a man who once flew too close to the sun? Maybe that's what life felt like with her. The radiance of her burning energy, the nourishing rays of her love and compassion. She brought me to my brightest moments and eradicated all the darkness from my life. How many lifetimes would it take to repay all that she has given me? I must say I'm a lot stronger now than I was back then. Time and experience have been keen teachers. While I am a man who believes deeply in science, I will never be able to deny the existence of God, her gods, her, us. While all my logic tells me one thing, I know my mother and her belief was strong. I'm not quite sure what is waiting for me at the other side. My vast imagination has a few ideas, and I know I will see my mother once again, one day. I know that she's on my horizon. I just need to complete this life so I can meet her at the finish line, and we can ride off into the sunset, laughing and holding on to one another just as it always was. I'm a man of few desires, just the love of my mother and a warm fire. So this book really is a lot about the Sunanda no one knew, and I think from here you would get a glimpse of how much more there was to her life than just being Mrs. Tharoor.
In fact, the book begins with Shiv's perspective, and Shiv is a constant player in the book, continuously, although there are so many characters in it, which actually forms the framework of what Pushkar actually was. It's quite amazing because there are so many aspects to her that come to light, which I really did not know existed at all. But taking it further, could you tell us about your first meeting with Shiva and why you kind of, Shivi, like she called him, you know, why you actually began from his perspective and why you're telling it through
Actually, I just began from the day of her death and how he heard about it. The book is not really from his perspective, and this just, I wanted, you know, him to write about her, so I've included that. But yeah, the thing is, you know, today if you see, it's going to be almost 6 years since she died. And the one person, I won't say only person, but really the main person to whom her absence means, makes a lot of difference is her son. He'd called me early this year and he'd graduated. And when he called and said, you know, today I graduated. And I said, well, that's great. I hope you're celebrating it. And he said, no, I'm not. So I said, why? Your mother would want you to. You know, she'd be so proud because that's what she always wanted. Their strives were always about her wanting him to study. And he, like a youngster, was more busy having a good time. So they would always have this conflict. So I said, you know, this was the day she was waiting for. So why don't you celebrate? So he said, you know, Sunanda, if things had been different, if they had been flipped, if I had been found dead, my mother would have moved heaven and earth to find out what happened. Why? And it's been, that one was 5 years, it's been 5 years, over 5 years, and I still don't have that answer. Till I have that, I am not celebrating. So I think this book, if there's only one thing that this book can achieve, I would hope for a closure to the case, because the closure is what the family deserves, and that is what's affecting them so badly. Especially the son. He's now 26, 27, he needs to get on with his life. So why he has a strong voice in the book is because really, there's the one person who misses her every single day, and he needs a closure to this whole case. And it's not just going anywhere. The case is just dragging on.
But also, you know, at many points in the book, you read about how Sunanda left her son with so many people because of the various circumstances she was in. She wanted to earn money. So do you think that kind of really impacted him? Does he feel badly about it at any point?
I think he understands that he had to be left alone because she was a single mother when her second husband died, and you know, almost in the same kind of mysterious circumstances as her. She was left with the mountain of debt that she had to pay. And I think by that time she realized that everything she has to do in life has to be done by the dint of her whatever qualities she has and of her own intelligence, her own hard work. And that's the time she took off to, you know, eke out a living. So she had to keep her son with various relatives and friends, mainly relatives. While he understands this, but yes, it did impact him a great deal. One, it impacted him emotionally. It made him very vulnerable. It was also sad that he hated living in other people's homes, as probably, you know, it's understandable. He yearned for a time and a space when he could call a place his own home. He would have his mother to himself. And most importantly, it was in one of his relatives' homes when he was staying that he had a very harsh incident. Someone caught him and locked him up in a room, a dark room, when he was just a child. And already a child who's very sensitive, very delicate. And he was there for 2 hours, but seemed like 2 days for him. And when he stumbled out, he'd lost his voice. He just could not speak. So Sunanda called him like she used to call every day. You know, that time we had only landlines. And after making polite conversation with the relative, she said, "Can I have Shiv on the line?" And when he came on the line, he just couldn't say a word. And she was shocked. And she just flew down immediately where he was. And she tried to find out what happened. And no one knew. Shiv knows who's the person, so do I, but you know, that's something we are not going to talk about, or it's not even there in the book. But the fact is, he got his voice back, but with a stammer. So this is acquired stammer that the boy got, and which is also there till today. It's much less pronounced. This only happens when he gets very emotional. But yeah, but that's one of the, you know, one of the effects of that kind of lifestyle and what he went through as a child, and that's there with him.
So, Shiv's perspective apart, this book is rich with facts and research. Research from across the world, you know. Sunanda lived in many countries, in Dubai, in Canada, then in India itself she lived in Delhi, and then she was born in Jammu and Kashmir. And so, Sunanda Pushkar lived in all these places, and Mehta has actually spoken to so many people across continents, across the country, and you just wonder how she put all this research together. Can you kind of talk about it? Because there are so many people involved in this book. You know, even from ranging from Sunanda's relatives to her own brothers, you know, her family, one who she loved, one of her younger brothers, and then kind of fell out with for a brief stint. And then thereafter, the many lovers she's had, and the politicians, and the industry people. It's just so full of so many different kinds of people. It must be seriously difficult to get in touch with them. So how did you do it?
Yeah, actually, when I started to write, I realized the quantum of work was a bit overwhelming. I mean, I really thought that maybe I've just taken on much more than I can handle, and whether I could do any amount of justice to it, which is why it took 2 years instead of the one that I'd promised my publishers. So actually, yeah, it started with, people did ask me, what is it that you want to write? Because there's so much written about her already. So I was very sure that a large part of the book has to be what's not there at all in the public domain that people don't know. So about 65 to 70% of the book is there, which is no one knows about it. It's all, first-hand research and reporting. I started by just getting everything written about her, bound into files. And I remember I had these 4 or 5 volumes of thick files that I carried with me everywhere. So I spent many months just reading them, underlining points, and then making a list of people I wanted to talk to. There were some 150 names, which went into categories of family, friends, cops, politicians, journalists, doctors. There were all these people who she had interacted with, and I started with getting the numbers and calling them. What was most difficult was I was not prepared for the wall of silence I encountered. People were just not willing to talk. And it was very difficult. I had to call people a number of times. The first time they would say yes, and then they would never pick up the call again. It was a controversial subject, and so I could understand, but still it made life really difficult for me. I remember one of the times there was this one person who's head of a big institute, and I was trying so desperately to get to him. I would send him mails and say, please meet me, please meet me. And so finally he sent me a mail back saying, okay, you come 3 days later and come and meet me at 12. And that was in Thiruvananthapuram. So I immediately took a flight from Bombay, and I went there and I met him. And the first thing he said is, you understand, of course, that I will not speak a word on Sunanda. So I said, yeah, but but you promised to meet me. He's saying, that's right, you kept saying meet me, so here I am meeting you. But I'm not going to say anything. So when I said, I've come all the way from Bombay, he said, you could have come from Boston. So that was one of those many times. And then the challenge was, and even the cops would not speak at all. I had to move RTIs to get a lot of information. Even that was difficult because the RTIs came back with a reply, sorry, this information is not available to us. The charge sheet, it was a huge 3,000-page charge sheet, which I tried so hard to get. It had 100 people, their statements, and it had about everything one needed. And I tried very hard. My colleagues are here. They know I harassed every colleague, every journalist I knew also. But Mr. Tharoor had moved court to say that the charge sheet should not be made public, and so that was also out of my hands. But despite all that, the family spoke. A lot of her good friends spoke. And so it kind of came together, mainly with that. What was also, daunting was then the fact that the case had gone through so many stages. So there was a whole lot of documentation. There were 4 medical reports. There were these viscera reports from the FBI also. There were these polygraph tests. All of these documentation had to be seen, studied, understood, and then put in a proper perspective and timeline. There was a softer thing of the tone of the book. This was a book which was very, very easily could have been made into a sensationalist book. It could have been made an extension of the page 3 culture that we have. And here I must thank my publishers. We were on the same page that we don't want the book to be one which is either sensational or sleazy in any manner. We want it to be a very sensitive book. A book which is non-judgmental, which puts down exactly the way things happened, for which we had to verify so many facts. I always say Sunanda was like a kaleidoscope. Everyone who saw her saw different colors of her. So someone called her warm, friendly, generous, amazing. And people would also call her outrageous and ambitious and manipulative, and someone who was networked. So it was very difficult to see what kind of person I should bring before the readers. And finally, one person can be actually all of these things. All of us have shades of gray. So you had to keep the tone very elegant is the word I would like to use in this book, and that became a big challenge to ensure that everything is, it's said in the way it should be. Then there were facts. It's going to be a slightly longer answer here. There were things like facts, I remember every reporting said that she was 53, 54 when she died, 52, when the fact is she was only 49. And hardly anyone knew that. In fact, when I wrote, someone wrote back saying, oh, you've got the basic thing wrong, her age. And so I had to write back and say that, first of all, her birth date was given to me by her brothers. And I had no reason to believe that they wouldn't know it. Secondly, this was the birth date which was there on a passport, and the picture of that was sent to me by her son. This was her birth date which was there on the postmortem report. And finally, she was 1 year elder to me. And well, I knew my age, my birth year, and so I could calculate that. Yeah, so in that way, this is also a bit of personal thing, because every time her age went up, so did mine. So I was very keen that, let's put the record straight once for all. This book went through many legal readings. This book went through 3 legal readings, because the case was sub judice. So we had to be very careful that, we wouldn't end up in the court. So the first lawyer sent me back some 71 points. The second sent back some 30 and then 20. And so we had to make sure that legally also we are on a clean wicket. Yeah, so yeah, finally it was a lot of work, but I'm happy that the kind of, the kind of way we wanted the book to come out and to be perceived and to be received, it's happened just that way.
So the first excerpt that Mehta read out was Shiv's perspective, but her language is quite eloquent and she's written it quite beautifully. So would you like to read a small passage which elucidates your style, her personality?
Oh, okay. So just give me a second. Okay, a small thing, I read it. When she arrived in Delhi, as Sunanda stilettoed her way through Delhi's high society, she also did what few Delhi socialites had ever managed to achieve for themselves: polarize the press. The starting point of the divide in the media over Sunanda went all the way back to April 2010, when Sunanda had just exploded on the scene following the IPL controversy, and the country had woken up to the headline, "Who is Sunanda Pushkar?" Amongst the first rush of stories that attempted to answer this seemingly confounding question was a searing piece that tore into her character and moorings with another musically inspired headline: "Got a girl named Sue," with the trailing line going, "and she knew just what to do." Vrinda Gopinath's story in Outlook magazine was an unrelenting, unforgiving account of Sunanda's eye-popping life story and her life in Dubai prior to her acquaintance with Tharoor. The hyper-deprecatory phrases in the brutal piece caused the attention of everyone who mattered in Delhi's society and media world, and elicited an equally forceful response from them. Only this time the target of the vitriol was the writer herself, who ended up earning more opprobrium than the subject of her article. The first to trash the piece was Vidya Subramaniam of The Hindu, who dissed Gopinath's story as witch hunt journalism, which allowed one to encroach upon one's personal territory. It seems no attribution need be made that if the person being profiled is judged to be completely without a virtue, her version can be disposed with, Subramaniam observed. So here I just want to also add that this was also something which was weighing down on me when I was writing. It was weighing down heavy on my own conscience that I'm writing about someone who is dead. Someone who is not there to defend herself about whatever I say, which is the reason every single line was vetted so many times. And there were so many versions of what all she went through. So, like in journalism, we have a saying that goes, when in doubt, take it out. And with Sunanda's case, I had to really apply it, because there is no incident here which is not verified by at least 2 people. Even what was there in public domain has been rechecked, because as journalists, I know we can write things which are not true. So everything which was there in public domain was verified. To everything else, there is a credible source which has been attributed, only so that when we are writing of someone who is not there, it just becomes, it's your ethical responsibility to ensure whatever you're writing is the truth. There could be some factual errors in the book. I am not, I can concede that if someone ever points out. But as far as we are concerned, I mean, I remember one incident of someone saying, I can tell you about how one of the things was, it says here also, so openly she was judged. People were, it became like a full-time occupation, especially of the ruthless place that Delhi is, to pass judgments on her about how she made money and how she was so successful. She was successful and beautiful in our society. You are successful because you're beautiful. It very often works that way. So they also told, there was a time in Dubai she was known as Su P. Menon. So they said, she dropped her name Sunanda and she took up Su, because Su sounded very exotic and Sunanda sounded very vernacular, which for obvious reasons I don't agree with. But that was the whole, there's a whole kind of perception. And then with Pushkar, they say her father's surname was Das. One of her brothers is Das. And again, she dropped Das and she took up Pushkar because again, it sounded more mysterious. Well, she was Sunanda Pushkar right from, I have known her in school. So these were one of the many very small things about her which were completely wrong, which was just because people were so happy to say things about her which were not complimentary. Because she was unlike any politician's wife in Delhi. She was seen, politician's wife, we don't know how many we know who are seen and they are heard. None of them. But Sunanda was seen, she was heard much louder than her husband. She would stride in the room and command absolute attention. She was a woman who you just could not ignore. So there were a lot of these facets which invited a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment, which is why when writing the book, we have tried to, keep it, I have not put her on a pedestal, far from it. Like it said, we have written about her lovers. And here also I'd say we have written all that she was open about. I mean, the object of the book was never to delve and dig out dirt on her and put it on public display. That is not there. But she was very open about her life. She was a woman she wore a heart on her sleeve, and she's been extremely open about relationships. So we put that also. We put all the sides of her, the flaws, the follies, and the good points for the people to judge for themselves about her life, and equally important about her death, which ranges from, it started with being due to drug overdose, and then it was made a case of murder, and presently is being investigated as a suicide. So even there, we have just fleshed out all the theories. I have written what works for a theory and what doesn't, and then left it to the readers to make their own judgment.
So what is your take? How do you think she died?
Thank you for asking this tricky question in the end. A lot of people ask me right in the beginning. I can't really say how she died. I mean, I was really under, no delusion that I'll crack the case, which the CBI and the FBI has not. The only thing I can say is it's hard to believe she would commit suicide. For the simple reason that she was not the kind, and it's just not me, her entire family, including her son, her brothers, and Dr. Tharoor, they've all gone on record to say she was just not the kind to commit suicide. She loved life. She had gone through so many challenges in her life. A single mother, someone who was broke when she was in Canada, never had a job, had debts, death of one husband, a divorce early in her life, and divorce was such a stigma in the society, coming to Delhi, trying to get accepted, and then just carrying on with her life. So there were probably bigger challenges than what she was experiencing at that time. Yes, she was unraveling. She was going through a phase when she was going to pieces, around when she died. We all know about the Twitter war she was having. So she was in extremely disturbed state of mind. She was popping pills, as she was wont to all through her life. Her brothers have told that. A lot of her friends had said. But yet, I don't think she was the kind to commit suicide, mainly because she was very worried for her son. She had talked a lot of times of making a will. She had this little fortune she had made in Dubai. And she kept saying how she must make a will to ensure it goes to her son. And as a mother who was so devoted to him, I don't think she would have taken any step impulsively without making sure that her son is catered for. Secondly, Sunanda was a very, very feisty woman. She was not someone who would go quietly. It's my own personal belief that if she had to commit suicide, she would have taken a paper, written down names of all the people who should be on after her death and made sure they get their just desserts. Because she was a woman who had a phenomenal temper. Everyone knew that. She was not averse to flinging things when she was angry, and she was very spontaneous with everything when she was talking to people. And and she loved her life. I don't think she was the kind to commit suicide. So it could either be an inadvertent drug overdose or the murder, which are the other two theories, which the police, it's up to the authorities to really find that out. I have no take at all. It could be, there was poison found in her body. The final medical report says she died because of the poison in her body, but they are not able to say whether it was self-administered or it was given by someone else.
So we have a few minutes left, I think about 5 minutes. And before we throw the house open for questions by the audience, could you just sum it up by saying whether Mr. Tharoor read the book and did he have anything to say about it?
I'm sure he's read the book. The publishers also sent him a copy, and I'm sure he has read it. I'm told he's read it. But as to his reaction, I do not have it.
Okay. So now the house is open for questions, so anyone?
Hello, my name is Rita Chablani. I have known Citadel for years. I used to live in Pune, Farida Master Days.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so happy to see you here and be at the festival. So this book, of course, has got a lot of attention, and for the reason because it's an unresolved murder. And for a person who is so feisty and so gorgeous and glamorous and shot like a comet, she just came on the scene and took off. And to marry Mr. Tharoor, So my question to you, Sunanda, is, when you heard your school friend had married Mr. Tharoor that time, when you haven't met her for years, how did it feel at that time? And then in the course of writing this book, were you able to meet him? And were you, he's a glamorous man and very vocal. So how did it feel if you met him at all?
When I heard she'd married Dr. Tharoor, when I knew her in Jhansi, like I said, she started becoming the kind of woman she became later. So I was not surprised. I always thought Sunanda is made for really higher things, and I thought that's the right trajectory for her life to follow. So, and of course, I felt very happy for her, and I'm sad that I did not connect with her at that time. Dr. Tharoor, I did not meet him. I wrote to him emails telling him that I'm writing the book, and I would, be very happy if he would talk to me about it. So he said that his lawyers have advised him not to speak till the case against him is over. He's been charged for abetment of the suicide, which the police believe, and like I said, a lot of people don't believe. But he said till this is over, he's advised not to speak, and I could understand that. I did try, and no, I did not meet him.
Hi, lovely session. My name is Asha. You've shared a lot of challenging and daunting experiences you had while you were researching for the book. Is there anything that, at any point of time you said, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Any, experience or, meeting with somebody or, anything that really, really jolted you despite having years and years of experience?
So often. I always say, if I had not taken advance from the publishers and I didn't have this deadline, I may have given it up in between. There were all kind of anxieties about one being, why should I be delving into someone's life? Is it really even ethical? Is this a done thing? But I must tell you, her son had told me that, my mother always said that someday you must write a book on my life. So I thought, that's one way and he said, when I heard your name is Sunanda, I thought maybe you could be the right person to do it. But there were anxieties. After even the book went to print, I would wake up at 3 a.m. with butterflies in my stomach and say, how will it be received? I also had years of journalism behind me, and I didn't want anything to happen in my career, to be any comments made. So there was a lot of anxiety all through. And yes, like I said, the time I saw her pictures of her body that time, also it disturbed me many times. So there were a lot of times that I thought I should just give up the book and just go back to my nice, comfortable career as an editor and stay there. But finally, after the book is out, I'm glad it's been, I'm really thankful to the way it's been received. There have been many write-ups, there have been many reviews, and it's just touch wood that, I was bracing myself for all kinds of reviews, for all kinds of flack. But I'm really grateful that almost no one has given me any flack, and they've all been very appreciative of the tone and the non-judgmental objective way in which the book has been written, which is not to say the challenges are not there. I did receive some, I wouldn't say threats, maybe warnings, some well-meaning advice saying that why do you want to get into, there were murky things also involved, why do you want to get yourself into that? But as a journalist, you're so used to people telling you not to write something, it just makes you want to write more. And the challenge continued. There were people who didn't want me to write the book, and there are people now who don't want this book to be read. So at a lot of literary platforms, this book is, there are times this book is restricted. It's not allowed to be at certain literary platforms. Thank you, Goa, for being one of the braver ones. So yeah, that is a challenge I'm facing now. But that's okay. I think Sunanda's life was so full of challenges, it's perhaps logical that her book should have some of them too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Sunanda's going to be around and her books are available, so you could interact with her. I think our time's out, but
yeah, please buy before the ban it totally.
Interact with her outside this. But if you want to know from the publisher, the editor-in-chief of Pan Macmillan is here, Prashun Chatterjee, on why you chose to publish this work and how it's doing. With as a parting word, that would be interesting.
Just 2 words. An interesting life.
Please come in.
Just 2 words. An interesting life and a gritty story. That's why we picked this up, and we knew that Sunanda, with her years of experience behind, would be able to do justice to it. Thank you, Sunanda, for writing such.
Thank you, Prasanna, for
Thanks.
having this faith.
Thank you.